Hi, I'm Carolyn Barnwell, and I direct and produce with StoryKeep. And I've also been doing work in the nonprofit space and with mission-driven organizations for over 15 years with organizations like National Geographic and World Wildlife Fund and the TED Prize. And the focus for me has been impact media. And there's a really cool connection with StoryKeep in terms of impact storytelling. And I just wanted to dig into that for a minute, because often when people think about impact, they're thinking about social good or influencing policymakers or some kind of social or environmental issue. And with StoryKeep, it's actually like the same level of professional media production in terms of what you would see on TV or Netflix, but we're looking at the impact in terms of the family dynamics or the family values. So instead of some social issue out there, it's really about articulating the culture in the family so that it can influence future generations, create some kind of really beautiful legacy piece, not just some little cute, nostalgic like family photo album, but something that really is emotional and speaks to the heart of what the family is going to want to preserve and pass on. So if that's something that feels interesting and charming to you for your family or a family that you support, we would love to hear from you. Please be in touch.
Welcome to Who We Remember. I'm Jamie Younger, the founder of StoryKeep and your host for this podcast. First, let me say thanks so much for joining us for the show. You have come into an uncommon place where we have wonderful conversations about the things that matter deeply, the people we love, and the purpose that we're trying to give to our own lives and legacies. Our mission at StoryKeep is to capitalize on the power of story for profound good in families of wealth. Since 2010, we've partnered with over 100 families worldwide, helping them create personal films and private podcasts that help them navigate their family's shared narrative. Our work is designed to deepen connections. My conversations on this podcast center around two questions. The first is, whose life story from your family would you most want to see documented? And the second question for my guests is, what are you, as a person and as a professional, hoping to create and leave behind? Today, I'm honored to welcome Emily Bouchard to the podcast. Emily is an author, speaker, and consultant who has spent over 2 decades guiding families through the emotional and relational layers of wealth. Her work focuses on leadership, blended family dynamics, and lifelong learning. She is also the founder of Bouchard Bespoke Consulting, and she hosts transformational retreats on her ranch in Texas. Emily is here to talk about her stepmom, Jan Goddard Feingold, a woman of remarkable intellect, creativity, and quiet determination. Jan's journey spans medicine, art, poetry, and deep personal resilience. Emily reflects on her layered legacy and the ways that her stepmom shaped their family, not just through what she accomplished, but really who she was. As a kid, Emily adored animals, and she proudly wore a velvet riding helmet, even though she never rode a horse. And she was a go-to dog walker in the neighborhood by the age of 5. Though she struggled with reading early on, she pushed through and eventually chose to attend the same Ivy League university where her stepmom had built so many memories. So settle in, you're about to hear a remarkable story and also meet a sage of our industry. This is Who We Remember. Let's dive in. So Emily, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation about your stepmom.
Yeah, so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward. I have to say, as I was looking at her name, Jan Goddard Feingold, if I'm saying that right, I was really struck by how great it is to have a name that has God, Fine, and Gold in it. That is a remarkable name. And I feel like from what you shared with me before that she, in many, many ways, lived up to her name, quite a remarkable name. I wanted to share at the top of the show, so much of who she was being your stepmom and your current working with blended families, as a primary focus, that we will get to that. But I really wanted to introduce her a little bit in some of the backstory of your stepmom, who's now passed, because it's quite remarkable. She was born in 1948 in Florida prematurely, which is actually an important part of her life story. And one of 4 girls. And in the 60s in the United States, all 4 of those young women went to Ivy League universities, which I just find remarkable and worthy of note. And then she later went on to, was it Penn for her medical degree?
Yeah, she went there for undergrad and for her medical.
Yeah. And she became a pediatric neurologist. And I think we can all sort of have an imagination of that, but maybe you could just talk about what her actual job was before sort of her life shifted.
Oh, yeah. She went into medicine to really do what she could to support premature infants in having a successful outcome. And I think it was really driven by what happened to her as a preemie and the impact on her life and how close she came to not surviving. And so she became fascinated about what is it that allows premature infants to thrive and have full capabilities when they survive that challenge. And so she studied neurology, pediatrics in particular, and really looked at brain development, because I guess that was the biggest issue for premature infants is how their brains are able to develop and if they had brain damage as a result of all of the medical things that had to happen to keep them alive. And her research was pretty seminal, and she discovered a way to dramatically decrease the likelihood of a cerebral hemorrhage in a premature infant's brain. And so that's one of the things she's known for in the medical field. Yeah.
Wow. So she was kind of living this incredible life as a neurologist, but she came into your life not as this, research scientist, but as your stepmom. Can you talk about how she came into your life and your memories of when she came into your life?
Yeah, she's a pretty remarkable woman because she took on a pretty shell-shocked family. So my mother died really suddenly of a cerebral hemorrhage. So exactly the thing that she was studying in premature infants. My mother had an aneurysm that burst, and that was when I was 14, and my older brother was 17, and my younger brother was 4. And she knew my father because they worked at the same medical center, and she was very good friends with one of the pathologists in the department that my father ran at the children's hospital. And, it was known by colleagues what had happened to my mom. And, she'd been in the hospital right there because they worked with Baylor College of Medicine. So Jan was just a kind, compassionate person who reached out to my father to offer her condolences. And they had known each other collegially, and they just started to become friends. And then pretty soon realized that there was a lot of affection and a lot of interest in furthering that. And that happened pretty quickly. And it's, you just never know from their perspective, but my dad had 3 kids and was devastated. And my stepmom came in and she rescued the family in a lot of ways, and took us all on. So it was a pretty significant time and very quick. Like, my mom had the cerebral hemorrhage in October of 1980. And I think we were introduced to Jan probably I think she moved in April of 1981. So it was pretty fast.
7-8 months later.
Yeah. But just imagine a 4-year-old in that household needing maternal support. And so, yeah, we ended up really quickly transitioning to a step family situation, blended family situation. Yeah.
Wow. I asked you, and I ask, everyone who comes on the show, like, what would you, because you chose her as someone you would want to document her life story, and you had noted that you would want to know what it was like to become a stepmom and entering this shell-shocked family. And what would you want to ask her about in regards to that?
Yeah, because, as a teenager, it wasn't like foremost in my mind to think about it from her perspective.
No, I don't think so.
I had a chance to connect with her in some different ways when I became a stepmom, and really got to respect and acknowledge, everything she had taken on at that time. And I think it would, looking back now and all my experience and what I've been up to, I would have loved to have had a chance to just sit down with her and ask her what that particular time was like, and what had her do it. Like,
why did she say yes?
Why would she take us all on? So I didn't really talk to her so much about the why from her perspective. Yeah.
I can imagine it would also be personally fascinating to know what her memories were of you and what you were like in her eyes when you were 14 and she was meeting you and coming into your family system. At least it would be a question I would want to ask.
Yeah.
She later, and maybe you, and help me understand sort of the time frame. Like, she came into your life as your stepmom, and she was this incredible person. She was a neurologist. She was a research scientist. She was quite prominent in her field and had done this seminal work. But then her life shifted pretty dramatically. And what's sort of the timeline of when she came into your life, and then later when she started suffering from a pretty dramatic disease?
Yeah, she knew she had some sort of autoimmune challenge that was never really accurately diagnosed. But when she was in medical school, she kept getting sick. She would often get impacted by illnesses that she was exposed to, and in pediatrics, in particular, like kids. So she shifted into research because her health improved when she wasn't working in direct patient care. So she knew she had something, and she had little things like she could walk up a flight of stairs, but then she couldn't do it again that same day. So there was something that was not firing correctly in terms of her own neurology and her muscles. And it was like some symptoms similar to like what multiple sclerosis would be, or muscular dystrophy, or lupus, or like she had all these different symptoms, but nothing was actually textbook of any of them. And so we all knew that. And oh gosh, she died in 2019. And I think there's a picture of her in a wheelchair when my nephew was a little boy. So I don't know, maybe within like the last 20 years of her life, or 15, she became more and more debilitated by the illness, and a lot of muscle weakness, and wasn't able to walk as well. She was never fully wheelchair confined, but it was just really helpful for her not to have to walk and lose that energy. And she ended up having a hard time breathing. And so she ended up getting a tracheostomy, where she had to because she had to use a ventilator at night to give her chest muscles a chance to relax, but she could still breathe. And it was very difficult for her to do that. And so they ended up giving her a trach so that it could just easily be utilized that way. And I'd say the last 11 years of her life, so if that was 2019, it would be like, 2008 or so, she started to get really dramatically sicker and had to be on like high dose steroids. And that really changed her life because she had been quite petite. And with the steroids, she became quite obese. So it was really hard for her. And she lost a lot of her hair. She would wear wigs. But she had this remarkable spirit. And the reason I wanted to really honor her on your show today is because of how she approached life in the midst of this body that was deteriorating very slowly and miserably over the number of years. I mean, she stopped being able to drive when she ended up with some sort of double vision that made it so she couldn't see accurately when she was driving. So she lost her ability to drive quite young, and then, the wheelchair got worse. But she always looked at what can I do and what is in my power and control. So when she had to go on disability and stop working as a scientist, she was also really creative. She also was an amazing black and white photographer, and she converted one of the bathrooms in the house into a photography dark room, and she had shows and created cards, and she was a really talented, creative person. And when it became too hard to do the photo trips or hold the camera, she shifted her creative focus into other things. And I wanted to highlight some of those because I think it just says so much about this, human spirit and what's possible, and to look at, the human potential, no matter what's happening to us, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And she really exemplified that and embodied it. And so I wore these earrings. So if you're watching the video, you can see all these like dangly earrings that she created. And she had this factory. My parents had a 4-story, my dad's 90, he still lives in it, a 4-story townhouse that they got when a huge flood went through Houston, and they left the area that our house had been flooded, and they got this very tall townhouse that had an elevator. So she was able to go up and down, no problem.
Oh, yeah.
And the 3rd floor was a large loft. And so she converted that into her factory, and she would.
Is that what she called it?
We called it the factory, and she would go down there every day. Didn't matter how she felt. She would get up every morning. She would we call it farputzt. She would put a wig on. She put her makeup on. She'd always have a scarf on because of the trach. I'm wearing one of her scarves. And she had like thousands of scarves. And she always made herself look put together. And she made I don't even know how many thousands of earrings. And each one was completely unique and handmade. And she had like painful hands that couldn't function really well. And she would work with these, and they're little tiny beads. This is not like a huge chunky earring, It's just like really detailed work. I know. And she also made necklaces. She made pins. She even practiced with Fimo clay. She got really excited about that, but it involved like a kiln, like a fire. And my dad he put his foot down. He's like, no, we're not.
The line.
She just loved to be creative, and it kept her busy. It kept her mind focused. It kept her going towards creating and producing something of beauty and meaning and value. And she was just an extraordinary person that way. And then the other thing was she found out she could make greeting cards. So I brought an example. So she would take a cardstock, right? Like this is just white cardstock. And then she would choose some sort of beautiful backing that she would cut out. She had a paper cutter. She had to measure it, cut it, and she would apply it and make sure it stuck to the cardstock. And then she made these 3D cards with all these different kinds of 3D stickers. This one has butterflies and a flower in the middle, but they could be super detailed and all kinds of different 3D. And sometimes she would create 3D things inside too, like where she'd carve it out and have stickers in there. And she ended up selling them in museum shops and at the synagogue and their gift shop, and people loved them. People would put in orders for their cards. So she had a company called Beauties and Cutesies, and she even had I can put it up close. You can see it. Yeah. She had her little, this is made by Goddard Feingold, and website and email. She created a little business where she made people happy and smile with beautiful jewelry and these cards. And people loved her. And I'll tell another story that leads, it also is about these, the factory would get full, right? Like she would be prolific because she did this every day. And, she would drop stuff and wouldn't be able to reach it. And like, she just kept going. And one of the things about her is every Tuesday morning, she would go and get her, fingernails done. She would go to her favorite salon, and it was not easy for her to get up in the morning. I mean, it was a real hard time to go from waking up to being all put together to going out into the world. And she had this time slot that she went to while she was working. She would go there every Tuesday morning, and the salon changed the design of how they were getting their nails done. So it was an open floor plan, and everybody was sitting around a round table. And she looked up one day and she's like, this is absurd. The same people are here every week at this time and we never talk to each other. This has got to stop. We need to know who each other are. And everybody jumped like to it, and they all connected, and they became the best friends, and they called themselves the Tootsies. And
I love that.
When she got sicker and sicker, she never missed it. And we always knew she was really having a hard time if she couldn't get herself up to go to that. And that was like a real indicator that, wow, we need to make sure her health is being up the game in terms of how to take care of it. And these women, tremendous supports and friends to each other. And they just would laugh and look at the joys of life and laugh at themselves. And they would get crazy hats that they would wear and crazy glasses. They decorated her wheelchair. They had so much fun together. And the salon really took notice of what these women were up to. And so when Jan started to like bring in different things she had made, the salon invited her to do trunk shows at the salon. And so each quarter she would come with her latest batch of earrings and necklaces and pins and cards, and they would have a whole show there. And people would come and buy her things, and she would like get known, like people would look forward to it and ask about it. So yeah, that's just a little example of who she was in the world.
I mean, it must be noted that so much time stepmoms get a bad rap. I'm sure you're really, really familiar with this in your line of work.
For sure.
And how lucky you were, but also maybe it's more common than, of course, there's tensions and all kinds of disruptions to family systems, and it's complicated, but the good stepmom doesn't get enough praise, and or the good enough, I should say. And what an incredible example as a human, but also as someone entering into a new family, someone who is, there's so many layers of inspiration of who this, woman was to you, but to everyone around her. It's very inspiring. And it makes me, in, the tiny moments that I think, I don't want to get out of bed right now, just new perspective, right? Again. So thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I thought was really charming and funny and interesting that you shared about her was that when she sort of knew that maybe her time was nearing the end, she decided in sort of story keep style that she was going to document some of her own story and preserve it and pass it along. Can you talk about that project that she designed for herself and how it sort of played out? Because I think it's kind of a charming story.
I think but it's also good to talk about from the story keep perspective, because I really wish, looking back on it, that we had tapped into what it is that you do and how you inspire the capturing of stories in video, because she had the best of intentions, and it was it was a real effort, and her neighbor helped her with it, and she
made a
video with her talking. And what she ended up doing was using it as a way to express her love and her care for all of us. And it was very thoughtful and very kind. And it actually was pretty early on when she ended up being in the wheelchair and she wasn't able to drive anymore. So it was kind of like the beginning of the end, but she had 11 years of this unbelievable spirit of living that nobody had any idea that she was going to live that long with this illness. And so she did it pretty early on when she was still very able-bodied and mentally competent and able to talk to us face to face. And so she was really excited to share it with us and show it to us. And my brothers were there. I was there. I think it was right before Thanksgiving festivities. And we sat down in the living room and she put it in. And it was a very odd experience because she's right there in the room with us, completely mentally there and with it, showing us a video of her telling us how much she cared about us. And well, it was odd on many levels because she is a doer and very kind and thoughtful. And she definitely, like, in terms of love languages, it's like, acts of service and
gifts,
gifts. Oh yeah, she was a big gift giver. I mean, she'd make these things. But affection and being demonstrative, or words of affirmation, were not her love language. So it was very odd for us to be in the room with her and have her tell us how she felt about us on a video screen. And so when it finished, we all were kind of dumbstruck. We didn't really know what to say or do. We just looked at her and we said thank you. And I think it was really disappointing for her. I think it felt really flat. But again, we didn't dive into that. I tend to want to understand context, and I'm always curious about what the motivation was. So I went into curiosity around, wow, what was it like to make this? And how, did Sarah offer? Did you think about it? Like, I wanted to know the whole context behind it. And that was a comfortable way to have a conversation about it, I guess.
Yeah.
And, we really got the intention behind it, but it was one of those things where it's be like, why can't we just sit and talk to each other about this? And it's like, it was such an odd disconnect that our family lived in. There was this, I don't know if it was like, it felt like a bit of a moat between us. So
yeah, that's an interesting
odd thing.
Yeah, to think about audience and impact and timing, right? Yeah, and without an outside party who's, interested in what you're trying to, do and accomplish, but helping you see different ways of thinking about doing it, really.
I'll share with you an opposite kind of story where she was going in to get her tracheostomy done right after Thanksgiving. So we had a big family reunion. Everybody flew in from all over the country and we had this big gathering. And it was before iPhones were really they were pretty ubiquitous, but I had a voice recorder device that was before we used our iPhones for everything. And I can't remember what it was called, but it was really simple. Flip. It was a flip camera. So you could take a picture, you could have a video. And so I just set it up on the dining room table and I aimed it at her. I said, hey, can we just go around and talk to you about different things and ask you stuff and capture, you before you go get your trach? Because we have no idea what having a hole in your throat is going to do to your ability to talk, your ability to express, let's just take this opportunity. And she was like, I'm not going to die. And it's like, well, no, we just don't, this is a big unknown. Let's just have fun with it. So I had to kind of have this, but she was very resistant to it. But I just figured if we just went for it, maybe she'd forget it was there. And she did. And we had a great time and we asked her different questions and talked about her life and stories and different things. And one of the big things about her is she grew up both of my mothers actually grew up in Christian homes, and they converted to Judaism. She did it on her own because she was really loved Judaism on her own. And my mom did it because she met my dad and they wanted to get married and have a cohesive family, I guess, in that way. So I was always brought up with both and I have relatives with all kinds of backgrounds. But we asked her, what was it like? What had you choose to convert? And what was, just things to get to know her, the stories that are interesting. And, after it was all done, I was able to download it and send it to her. And my dad told me that she watched it and listened to it that night. which I thought was really surprising, and that she really cherished it and loved having it. And it was really fortunate that there's a lot of technology that's happened with trachs. So she had there was like a filter that was on it. So when it was fine and clear, she really could speak without any significant difference to her voice. So it was like, it wasn't like as much of a loss as we thought it could be.
Yeah.
But it was still, again, it was like this.
It was a good trigger.
Treasure moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to make sure that we get to talking about how her influence on your life to some degree, I think, influenced the path you've taken with such thoughtfulness and passion around helping and supporting blended families in their journey, right? And I'm wondering if you can speak to the connection you see, which seems sort of obvious, but I'd like to hear from you the connection between Jan and you and the work that you do today.
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought, wow, the degree of impact she had on my life is really quite something. And the university I chose to go to was Penn, and it was because it was I didn't even know it existed, and she loved it. And so she encouraged me to apply and took me for an interview, and really loved showing me where she had lived. I ended up living there my freshman year, and my whole university career happened because of that. And I ended up being able to do an individualized major there, and that was really a thrill. And because it was an individualized major, I had to have a advisor that I worked with to create a capstone project for it. I did a thesis, and she recommended a professor that she loved from when she was at Penn and who did a research project with her when she was at the medical school. And her name was Renee Fox, and she was really known for doing research around people who've given an organ to somebody, and then the person lives as a result of having that organ, and the survivor guilt that can happen for the person who receives the organ. And she was just fascinating. And this connection between the medical world and sociology, and she was in the sociology department. And I did a research project on young adults who had been treated for cancer as teenagers. And I was really interested in that because of some therapeutic camping I had done as a counselor for kids with cancer. And I was so impressed by their resilience that I wanted to learn more about their life trajectory and what allowed for that kind of resilience. And so she was the perfect advisor for me. And again, that happened because of Jan, and just was a lifelong family friend. And so that's another way. And then the other thing about Jan is she took us on. She really unconditionally took us on as a maternal, loving, mothering presence in her style, while never competing or supplanting my mom. And she always made sure that there were pictures of my mom in the house, and that things that would remind us of my mom, whether we still have cookbooks that were my mom's. Like she didn't clear her away to make room for herself. She just expanded it. And she had this idea that she put into our hearts as well, that the heart is this really expansive, loving organ that has enough capacity to love, infinitely. And it's not a zero-sum game. Like if you love one person, then you can't love somebody else. And she really helped us with that. And it's really informed my work and this idea of family of affinity. And you get to choose who you are and how you are with the family in your life, whatever it looks like. And then the other thing is her family, her 3 sisters, her parents, their children, embraced us fully. They just completely took us in as part of their family. And when I was in college, I would go to Florida every spring break to be with my grandparents that were my step grandparents, but they completely opened their home to me. They were happy to have me there. And it's like, they didn't have to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Like we weren't their daughter's kids, but they did. They fully embraced us. And I have a very close relationship with my cousins and my aunts and uncles as a result. And again, it was never like a clear distinction of blood versus step versus half, and it was just we're family. And I lived in that. And I'll also say my mom's mom divorced my maternal grandfather when my mom was 7. So I had step aunts. My mom's mom remarried the man who I always thought of as my grandpa, but he was my mom's stepfather. And so I had step aunts I was born into that. And so this idea of steps being part of the family, and like you just knew who the parents were, but it wasn't like a distinction of, better or worse or anything like that. So I think like Jan's family just took that to a whole other level with how they embraced us. And yeah.
And having had this truly remarkable experience being a stepchild and then later being a stepmom, and how does that, I know you have, so much experience working with so many different families, but how does that personal experience being her stepchild and, growing up into an adult with her there, how do you think that in particular informs how you approach your work?
Well, it's so part of my nature, like nature and nurture, I guess you could say, that it's like, it's not a problem to be a step family. It's not a problem to be a blended family. It's more of how do we want this family to be? And I just think about how she really had strong values that she lived and portrayed in her life and with all of us, like this kind of unconditional support and encouragement, and never kind of giving up, like that never giving up feeling. And I think that that's really infused me with my work with people that are dealing with challenging, complex family dynamics, and step family being the specialty. And like, there's so many different ways to go about it. And it's like, what's the right one for you based on your values, based on what you care about, and then taking into consideration the history and the feelings of the people that you love. I think that that's the other thing she really embodied, was that she didn't feel a need to shore up her identity in relationship to my mom's, so that they both could be in existence in our lives. And that's a big issue for a lot of step parents, is like their role and how they are in the family compared to like if the other parent's alive and well, or if they've passed away. And what does that mean? It's so significant, and how to navigate that is really important. So I think that that's informed a lot of what I do.
Well, technically being a step parent myself, and Pete and I having a daughter together, I certainly appreciate the complexity of the work that you do. And I also am very lucky and feel very privileged that I kind of landed, as we say in the Netherlands, with my nose in the butter, which is a good thing. But I know that it still has its own complications. Absolutely. I have been watching you launch your own independent practice, seeing how you're taking your work that you did in different entities over time, and now kind of coming to me kind of fully forth as your strength and who you are. And it seems like it's a perfect opportunity to just talk to you in closing about the impact that you really are hoping to make, because now you're the full architect, right, of that work. And what, if you want to say, the legacy that you're hoping to create and leave, or the impact that you're trying to create right now, how would you express that at this point?
Oh, thanks for asking that. It's interesting because I think about how prolific my stepmom was on so many levels, and how she just took on life to the fullest and really followed her interests and saw how far she could take them regardless of what was happening to her physically. And I think what's happened for me, just at this point in my life is it's like, I just want to create in my way as much as I can and see how much of an impact I can have through words. So I'm actually doing quite a bit of writing and creating some really inspiring book projects for myself that I've been thinking about for the last 20 years in this field. And one of them is on this concept of wealth coherence, that really looking at how to be internally wholly aligned with like who we are, what our purpose is, why we're here, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and then how that gets expressed externally. So like the internally external, like our relationships, our career or our avocation, our philanthropy, and our finances. And when those are all in a coherent flow, there's such a remarkable thing that happens in life where we just have that sense of flourishing or fulfillment and like an abiding sense of this is who I am and what I'm here to be doing. But if one of them gets like overly emphasized, it can be at the expense of other. And so it's really about how to maintain and have a really coherent life. And it's a model I've been using for years, and I'm just bringing in all of these different aspects of my lifelong learning, which again, I think Jan really emulated. Like she would just be like, oh, I want to learn about poetry. And I didn't even talk about it. And she was also a published poet. Like this is her book on poetry. And she loved writing, and she wrote poems, and she wrote articles to educate psychiatrists on how to work with medical doctors that were on disability and got depressed, because that was what she was going through. And it became part of a whole education program. So I find like there's like this overwhelming desire to write and get these thoughts out and just bring these concepts to people in ways where they can benefit from them and their leadership, their roles within the family, within their own lives, and so that they can experience the fullness of their potential.
Well, I've always experienced you as someone who's very integrated in your own self. I remember the very first time I heard you speak, and I was very compelled, yes, by the content of what you said, but the way that you held yourself and presented on the topic of sort of the heart of money. And it makes all the sense in the world that you would be synthesizing that and bringing that and able to articulate it for people to take in for themselves. So I'm greatly looking forward. I don't know how long your book journey will be, but when it's complete, to diving into that. And I'm sure it will add greatly to this world and to this field. So keep going. I know that your stepmom is, rooting you on. Yeah. I've really enjoyed hearing about her, understanding you more deeply, I think. And frankly, just giving you another space to share who you are, because I think you've done and continue to do really great work in this field. So thank you for giving us a window into how you became who you are today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was great to get to really explore my relationship with Jan on a whole other level. So thank you.
My pleasure.